Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the show.
You meet someone online and there's this instant connection. It's amazing how much the two of you just seem to click. They live somewhere far away and there's some plausible reason they can't travel to meet you. They tell you they're in love with you and you feel optimistic for the first time in a long time. They have a successful career, yet somehow they need money from you to solve a short-term problem, always with the promise of paying you back. Time goes on and they need more money more urgently. You've started to see the cracks and begin to wonder whether they've been lying this whole time. All of a sudden it hits you. You've been scammed. Fool Me Twice is the story of my mother, Jules Hannaford, a woman who was drawn into the dangerous world of sweetheart scams. After a trip overseas to meet a stranger, a dangerous altercation in a Manchester hotel room, and thousands of pounds lost for good, she's here to tell her story. Fool Me Twice, a true crime podcast, is available on Apple Podcasts, Ozcast Network, and anywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Today I'm here with Cristina Rodenbeck. Hi, Cristina. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Jules. Thank you for having me.
How did you find yourself in the coaching and mindfulness realm?
This has to do with my personal story. I came to Hong Kong in 1998 with my partner, currently my husband. So I came as a trailing spouse. So I left everything I had behind. I was advertising executive and I was very independent. I had my own apartment. I had my car and I lived alone. So I gave up on all of that to come to Hong Kong. And we arrived exactly when we were hit by the Asian tiger crisis. So I couldn't find a job. And that was very overwhelming. And it was a time that I experienced things that I never experienced before, like loss of confidence, loss of identity, unhappiness, and really not knowing who I was anymore. And then we decided to leave Hong Kong. We left Hong Kong in 1999. We went to Portugal, so we don't go all the way to Brazil, my home country. We went halfway. And that's when I went back to work and I found myself, and everything that I lost, I gained back. And my husband received an offer and he left Hong Kong. He actually gave up his career because he wanted me happy. And it was amazing actually what he did, because he gave up on what he was doing to help me, make me happy, because he knew we couldn't stay in Hong Kong if I wasn't happy. So then we both came back. So then I came back working. And that was a completely different scene, and then I felt more confident. I felt I could enjoy Hong Kong as I was meant to enjoy. And later my career evolved into corporate training, executive coaching, and my hobby and my passion was always wellness and well-being. So I decided to study the wellness therapies that supported me in my own wellness and well-being. So that's how everything came together. So it was like part of my career path and part of my own path, my own journey. Everything that I do is related to that. It has the corporate side and it has the wellness side because it's part of my story.
Did you decide to branch out on your own and create your own business, which I believe is called Manipura Wellness Practice? Is that right?
Yes, it was from this calling to use everything I developed, use my corporate experience, use the tools that I learned, and help my friends. Because basically 90% of my friends are still in the corporate world, and my husband is still in the corporate world. And because I had that experience and I knew what they were going through, I wanted to be able to help them. So I was working with a few companies, but I wanted to create my own brand because I wanted to also to work with individuals. And I knew through them, through these partnerships, it wasn't going to happen. So I wanted to create something for myself. And that's when I created Manipura Wellness.
What sort of clients do you work with? Is it mostly corporate or individuals or a mixture of both? And do you work with small groups or large corporations or the whole gamut?
Yes, I work with executives that are successful in what they do and they want to keep the game. So then we take a look at, okay, so what are the things that you need to continue to develop? What are the things that you need to continue having the success that you want? And then I also work with executives that are successful, but something is feeling off for them. So they're feeling that something is not in place. So we take a look at, okay, so what is going on for you? What are the choices that you're making? What's having the greatest impact? And then we take a look at that. And most of them appreciate wellness and well-being, the importance of being well to be able to do what they do. And I also work with individuals, all walks of life, that want to develop tools and techniques to continue taking care of themselves. So it's corporates and individuals. And I also work with corporations. So I also work as a wellness curator. So I work with companies that want to integrate and create wellness programs, right, to support the employees. And I also come in as a facilitator because of my wellness practice. I come in as a facilitator to deliver talks. So I do have a different hats, and I come in on both sides, working with individual people and also with the big corporations.
What sort of things might you encompass in your wellness programs in big corporations? Is it like teaching people how to meditate and taking time for themselves and self-care? Is it kind of what they do outside the corporation, or is it within the corporation as well? Like making sure that the CEOs and stuff give them breaks or time for wellness in their working day, things like that?
It's a bit of everything, right? Because what we find is if you don't have the support of senior management, the changes won't be implemented. So one of the greatest programs that I worked with is mindfulness. And we know that, for example, mindfulness, if you don't have support from the upper management, it won't be integrated and it won't be supported as a practice. So a lot of the corporations that, for example, develop and embrace that, it started from the top to bottom, right? So then it's a variety of themes that we work on, from mental wellness, physical wellness, emotional wellness, and also a few tools and techniques, which, for example, mindfulness, right? So we work with a plethora of topics, but related to these main pillars of wellness and well-being.
Do you feel that if corporations have mindfulness and wellness incorporated in their programs and within their structure, that it improves the productivity and the success of the company and the individuals?
I'm a huge believer. And in fact, I came across an article from Forbes saying that 2/3 of the employees in the US experienced burnout in 2019. And burnout, what that means is there's a physiological aspect, but there's also the mental aspect. That means that most probably they won't come back to what they did before, or they can't. So that's how impactful it is. So integrating wellness throughout the days, throughout what we do is a huge part of the success of a company. Because if people are unwell, they're failing. They're not being themselves. They're not living to their potential. And then they're heading for a lot of problems, physiological problems, mental problems, emotional problems. And they carry that to work because they're a whole individual, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We really do. Our lives intersect. Our personal lives and our work lives really are very much connected.
Yeah, so I think the corporations need to realize that people don't leave their problems at home. They bring them to work. They can't pretend or not be themselves at work because they won't be their authentic selves as well. So it's impossible to say, okay, so I'm not going to think about the financial problem I'm having or my spouse's problem or my relationship problem and just focus on my emails. It doesn't happen like that.
No, it just doesn't work that way. Have you had to adapt and adjust your program during this year of the pandemic?
Yes, but it was mostly, in terms of content, it was adjusting to people working from home, right? So the reality and the context has changed. So we take a look at that and include that in the programs. And also the media has changed, right? The mediums. So what was face-to-face is now Zoom and webinars and things like that. So we had to adjust on these two fronts, how to deliver the programs and the content to make it relevant for the people in this different context.
How do you think people have been impacted by having to work at home? How's it impacted their mental health and well-being?
It has a huge impact. First of all, they're working longer hours. By being at home, we think, they can manage their time, but actually the reality is they're working longer hours. They're staying longer in front of the computer. Some of my clients mentioned they don't eat, they skip meals, and also they're having to multitask because there are a lot of people in the house with them. Most of them have families, have children in the house. So they're also having to supervise someone else, take care of someone else, especially if they have young children, right? Having to support them doing the online schooling and things like that. So there's much more to do and with limited time, right? The hours of the day haven't extended at all. So we still work within the 24 hours.
I think for me personally, I didn't put as much time and effort into exercise or self-care because I just found myself trapped at home in work. And also, I guess, a little bit about that fear of going out and COVID in the early days and things like that. So are you finding that as well, that people aren't putting enough time into their own self-care?
I think that was the very beginning. When the pandemic started, I think people just didn't know what to do or how to do it. And then as soon as we got a few months into it, I think people realized this is not going to change. So how can we better ourselves? What are the little things we can do to make this pleasant, to make this manageable? So then I started to see a few clients started to integrate more things. For example, making sure that they had a walk during the day, making sure that they stopped during lunch, during the meals, and actually left the computer and went to the dining table and had food and had also moments with their partners or their children and things like that. So I do think things have changed and we're learning to work with what we have.
Yeah, I agree. I can see that in myself. I've made some big changes because the way I was operating in the early days of working from home, it was just making me feel stressed and anxious. So you've got to do these other things to make sure that you can manage. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think at the beginning, no one knew how long it would take. And a lot of us, perhaps compared to SARS, right, in 2013, it's going to just take a few months. So it's okay. This is doable. This is manageable. But suddenly it took many more months. From epidemic, it became a pandemic. And then things got out of hand, right? And then we realized by summer we couldn't travel. And a lot of people were counting on summer because summer is a big moment for a lot of us to re-energize, reconnect with our families, just rest and restore and things like that. So that actually didn't happen this year.
Yes, and it may not happen next year either. Next summer, we just don't know yet, do we?
We don't.
Yeah. I believe you're also an iridologist. What is iridology and how does it work?
Iridology goes back big time, right? First of all, we always had a fascination of the human iris, right? The human eyes. There's an author that I love, Joy Navarro. He's a former FBI agent, and he wrote a book about body language. And he talks about eyes, how revealing they are, right? And how they can tell us the truth. Because we know when someone's interested through their gaze, through their eyes, right? The eye contact. And we know when someone's switched off or they're concealing something because they don't look at you. They avoid the eye contact. So through the work that I did in the corporate world, and I always knew the importance of the eyes. And I came across iridology, which fascinated even more because it started talking about the body. And as Hippocrates used to say, right, the father of medicine, behold the eye and behold the body. That's because the human iris contains information about the body. So it's a science and it's a practice that we take a look at the body through the human iris, which is the colored part of our eye. And what it does is it reveals the relative state of health, meaning what's the genetic makeup of a person and what are the things that most probably they're bringing based on lifestyle choices. And that means what I eat, how I think, and how I live my life. For example, if someone is developing, for example, diabetes, and then we look, there's no markers on the pancreas, then we take a look at how's your lifestyle. What are the things that you're doing that you develop because it's not part of your genetic makeup? So it's an analysis tool. It's not diagnostic. So it's not meant to replace blood tests, scans, or MRI and PET scans and anything like that, any diagnostic testing. But it's a tool. It's a tool to help us take a look at the body. And it's a process. I photograph the iris and I check the iris against the map. Our iris has maps of all the organs of the body, like the feet, if you've done reflexology.
Yes, I have. Yeah. And
so it's the same thing for the eye. The eye reflects all the organs because all the organs are connected to the spinal cord and the spinal cord to the nerve, to the optical nerve. So we can see the body parts. We have those maps.
That's so interesting. So I have a black spot in one of my eyes, and a long, long time ago, an iridologist looked at it and said it was related to my stomach and my bowels, something like that. So I think that's very interesting.
It's great that you did it before. Yes, those are markers. So that's what we call the markers. And these are signs and things that we take a look at. Where are they sitting? And what does that tell us? And then we ask the client about that. And so we do the physical part. Besides the physical part, we take a look at the emotional part because there's something called emotional blueprint. We also experience emotions there, and they're also marked on the iris. And also
that's interesting.
Yes, it's super interesting. And then there's the energetic part. So we take a look at also the eye and look at the emotions. Where are they sitting? And also the iris, we connect it to the chakra. So if you're into a chakra, the energy system of the body, we take a look at which ones are being impacted and what are the energy patterns. And I'll give you an example. If there's a marker on the gallbladder, and then we take a look at and we ask, does it run in the family? And I came across a client that mentioned, yes, my mother had it and my grandmother had it. So that is an indicator of perhaps an energetic pattern. And according to Louise Hay, I don't know if you came across her work.
I do.
Yeah. So
Heal Your Life with Louise Hay.
Exactly. And she has a book that she talks about the physical symptoms and also the organs, and she correlates them. And then she talks about gallbladder being bitterness in life. So then I was asking the client, how are the relationships? Tell me about the family and what runs in the family. And it was very much about relationships.
Interesting.
Yes.
So that's so interesting because the thing in my eye was linked to the stomach and bowel, they said. And it just turns out my grandpa died of colon cancer and my mum has been diagnosed with colon cancer and is doing really well, thankfully. But it's obviously in the family and I've only just discovered that. I didn't know about what my grandpa had died of. And I've had some issues and things. So it's really interesting that now you're saying all of this. I can see the link between what was told to me back in my 20s and what I'm going through now.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
And that's the whole idea behind it. With that learning, what are the things that you can do to take care of yourself? So, for example, if the bowel is an area of attention, so what is it that you can do to take care of it? If it's supplements, if it's diets, to make sure you're taking care of it because it manifests in the family.
Absolutely. That's so interesting, fascinating. How do you use crystals in your practice?
Well, crystal is also beautiful and it has a big story behind, right? Because many civilizations and cultures have been using crystals for thousands of years, right? As adornments, as healing tools, as talismans, and also even in science, right? The technology behind the computers, clocks and watches and things like that, right? So it has been used for thousands of years. I use it in my practice in 3 different ways. As a healing tool because I'm a crystal healer. So I use it as a tool to do the work that I do. The second way that I use it is with clients and helping them realize which are the stones that are useful for them in what they're going through. For example, if a client wants to develop meditation, mindfulness and meditation. So we talk about perhaps amethyst, that those crystals are calming and soothing to help them build that practice. Or if they want to be more clear, be more focused. So we talk about, for example, clear quartz. So there are a number of crystals that can be useful for those states, like for those objectives. Then the third way is pretty much feng shui, taking a look at what are the crystals that you can use for home, for office, to also support you in what you do. For example, it creates wealth and abundance. Citron is a very popular one. And it can be financial, it can be relationship, it can be communications, it can be anything, right? So it's helping create the environment that you want, be it at home or be it at work.
I have terrible trouble sleeping. What crystal would you recommend for me to improve my sleep? Amethyst?
Amethyst is a great one, but we need to take a look also if anything else is impacting your sleep. For example, what we see a lot and what our clients have reported, they feel a lot of electromagnetic field around them, the antennas, the Wi-Fi devices. You know, when you turn on your mobile, you can pick up everyone's Wi-Fi, right? So that's how impacted we are. And some people are very sensitive to energy. So then I would be suggesting black tourmaline, black obsidian, or shungite, because these crystals are very good to protect against this negative and radiation and things like that.
Interesting, because I sleep with my phone next to my bed.
Do you have the airplane mode on or off?
No, I don't. Oh,
can I
put airplane on? Okay.
Yeah, can I suggest to put airplane mode? Yeah, because if it has the Wi-Fi on, that means it's trying to connect to all this type of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're sensitive to any type of interference, most probably that's impacting also your sleep. So I would put it on the sleep mode, the airplane mode, and also have some protective stones. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try that. Thank you.
Okay, good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. I saw on your website that you're a Kirtan facilitator, or is that how I say it? Kirtan or Kirtan?
Yeah, there were several ways of saying it. I say Kirtan.
Oh, Kirtan, a Kirtan facilitator. What is this?
It's a form of devotional chanting that is originated in India.
Oh, I love chanting.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
so
I love it.
Kirtan's for you.
Yeah.
And for me, it's also a mind practice because it's based on repetition of mantras. In mantra, the word mantra is man means mind and tra means clearing, releasing. So by repeating the mantras, we're helping our mind to release. So it's releasing thoughts, all those concerns and those repetitive thoughts that we have thousands per day. And it's also about releasing emotions because often during the day we have to bottle up, right? Hold on to it. That anxiety, that stress, that frustration, things like that. So it's really releasing all of that. And the other thing it does, it just helps you sleep better as well. That's what a lot of the chanters mention.
Really?
That it's very calming, it's very releasing. That they walk away from the session just feeling blissful.
Do you do this with individuals or do you do like group sessions that people can come to?
There's a little story behind this one as well.
Social distancing at the moment, isn't it? Anyway.
Yeah, but there's a little story behind this as well. Once I came across Kirtan, I knew how powerful it was and I knew how much I needed it. And here in Hong Kong, it was difficult to find a consistent practice. Then I decided to create something. So I created a practice, a session, and I started delivering it in different studios and different yoga studios here in Hong Kong. And then people started offering their houses, their homes. The chanters say, can you do it in my house? Because they just felt the energy completely shifted and they felt that peaceful feeling around them. So we started doing house sessions and the group grew so much that now we're more than 100 chanters. And until last year and before the pandemic, we used to have monthly practice, like in a home session. And since the pandemic, we are trying online, like Zoom sessions. It's not as before, right? It's different because what we realized in the practice is we like the connection, the human connection. We like to be with each other. So we're missing that bit. And unfortunately, Zoom doesn't create that. So right now, let's say so far we're having to do Zoom. But once we can, we're going to get together again.
That sounds amazing. I might have to turn up to some of those. I think I would love that.
Oh, I think you will.
Yeah. How are Bach flower remedies helpful for healing and general well-being?
Bach flower system, it's a healing system, an emotional healing system that was originated in the early 1900s in the UK by someone called Dr. Edward Bach. He was a physician and he was treating patients, war patients, with similar wounds. And he realized some patients were able to heal faster than others and some not heal at all. So then he started realizing the role of emotions in healing. And he realized that it was very powerful. If someone that was sick but was unwell, emotionally unwell, the ability to bounce back and to get out of it was limited, right? Was compromised. And that's when he found out he had cancer. And so he went to the countryside, to Mount Vernon, and he dedicated the rest of his life to developing an emotional healing system that was related to flowers. So it's a flower-based, and it's an energy system that helps us through emotional states. So I don't know if you heard of Rescue Remedy. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've used Rescue Remedy.
Yes, it's a very popular one. And it's the only one in his system that's a combined formula. So it's a formula that was created to support us in specific states, what we call SOS states. So, for example, situational, right? If I'm going to deliver a presentation and I have stage fright, or if I'm going to catch a flight and I don't like turbulence, or if I'm going to have a difficult conversation, that's what the remedy is for. It's for situations. Now, the session is based on, let's say, almost like a coaching session. We sit down with the client and we try to understand what's going on for them. What are they feeling that is overwhelming, or they're feeling imbalanced? And then we take a look at what are the emotions that are part of that, and what are the emotions that need to be addressed. And then we create the formula that supports the individual take care of those emotions. Because Dr. Edward Bach believed we're like an onion with those layers of emotions. And depending on how we experience these emotions, it may take us off balance, right? We may lose ourselves.
Sure.
And so it's a healing system it's flower-based, let's say.
Oh, it sounds interesting. Do you create remedies for your clients based on what they need?
Yes, and the process is very interesting. I'll share with you an example of a client that I came across with insomnia. And so I was asking him, when does it happen? How does it happen? And he was saying, I wake up. I'm able to start to sleep, but I wake up and then I can't go back to sleep. So then I was checking in like, okay, so what's the first thought that comes to mind when you wake up? He said, work. So what about work? And then he was saying, well, it's about my boss. Then so we start digging in, right? And then through the digging in, he was creating this awareness that he was fear. It was this relationship based on fear because he was new to his role. He was realizing he wasn't getting along with his boss. And he felt that his role was in threat. He was in a threat state. And that was impacting his sleep.
Oh, wow. How interesting. And then the Bach flowers helped him
address the fear.
Oh, that's amazing. Why do you feel that people work such long hours in Hong Kong?
Well, clients report different things. A few of them. One is many clients work with regional jobs. So we're ahead of the other markets, right? So they have to stay awake longer because the calls happen mostly at night. So that's a big thing. The other thing is people are having to do more with less resources. So that means a lot of the teams are tighter. So there's more workload. So there's much more to do. So everyone has more to do nowadays. The third one that I'm coming across is a lot of people have their agenda and diaries online. So then people jump in and book meetings all day long. So then when the client comes to look at their agendas, they realize they have meetings from 8 or 9 to 5, and they start their work in the evenings. Their stuff, they get it done in the evenings throughout the night. For me, the last one in Hong Kong, which also I've experienced, right, is work culture. It's arriving late and leaving late. That also impacts a lot of executives.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost cultural as well, isn't it? In Chinese culture as well, to put in the long hours.
Yes.
It makes you appear productive or successful.
Yes, it's the face value, right? If I leave, they will forget me.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. How important is a good work-life balance for somebody?
For me, it's everything. These come together. For me, they're not two different entities. They are the same entity because if you're well, you can do anything well. You can work well, right? So that's how important it is. If someone is sitting in having to sit for hours and hours, like we were talking about, going through hundreds of emails, but in pain, they can't possibly be the best that they can, right? So it's about being well, feeling great, feeling resourceful, feeling resilient, and to flow in all the areas of life, and work being one of them. So these two components need to come together.
Absolutely. So how do you think that someone can achieve good emotional health?
For me, there are 4 steps basically to it. First of all is acknowledging, like, okay, today I'm angry, right? I'm angry. The second thing is accepting it and being with it, because a lot of us struggle with emotions. And so we push it away, we bottle it, and we don't want to have to deal with it. So it's really accepting and being with it, right? And the third step for me is, okay, so I'm angry. So what are the tools and techniques to manage that and to deal with it in a healthy way? So perhaps it's practicing a breathing technique. Perhaps it's writing down what happened, or talking to someone I trust. Look, I'm angry because this happened. Da, da, da. So I'm kind of channeling that, right? And the last one, the fourth step would be, if I still did that and I'm still feeling overwhelmed and I still not be able to manage that, is looking for help, is reaching out for qualified help. I need some help to get through this because it's too much for me to deal with it alone. And my hope is that today, with the ongoing pandemic, we need to help each other. We need to be okay with sharing that we're not okay, right? We live in a community, and then one of the greatest things about community is the ability to support each other. And another thing that I find important to share is that it's not only emotional wellness alone, let's say, but we need to take a look at the other areas, right? The other pillars, for example, the mental. How are my thoughts? What are the quality of my thoughts? Because our thoughts ultimately trigger our emotions, create the emotions, right? Physically, how is my physical being? Because if I'm in pain, or if I'm having digestive issues or any type of issues, of course it will impact my emotional well-being. Financial, how's my financial health? Am I happy with what I have? Because that also impacts. So you see, all these things impact emotional wellness. So it can't stand alone, be a standalone item, but it comes together. So that's what my focus when clients come to me as well is taking a look. Okay, so emotions is showing up, right? That's the big flag. So let's take a look at what else is going on for you. What's impacting you? Where's it coming from?
Absolutely. That makes complete sense. It's all interlinked, isn't it? Mind, body, spirit. It's all connected.
Absolutely.
I noticed that you help people align with their purpose. So how does one align with their purpose and recognize what it is?
I like to refer to Paul Dolan's work called Happiness by Design. I don't know if you came across this book.
I've heard of it, yeah.
So he talks about 2 components of creating and designing this happiness is having purpose and pleasure in what we do, right? And creating those. So purpose is about living our values. It's about finding meaning in what we do. So if we're doing that, most probably we're tapping into pleasure and joy because we're living a life that's rewarding, that's meaningful, and it's contributing to a greater good. So when clients come to me, we take a look at, okay, so we start with the basics, right? What are your values? Because a lot of people didn't have time yet to think about it. Most of them actually, they started straight away their careers, right? Because the opportunities were showing up, but they actually haven't sat down and thought, okay, so what are my values? What do I really care about? Or how do I want to show up in these relationships? Okay, so these are the values. And then we take a look at what are you doing? What are the actions, the activities that you're doing? Are they aligned with these values? Or do you see any gaps? What's missing for you? And that's when we take care of the purpose.
Yeah, our values really underpin everything, don't they? Everything that we do.
Everything.
Yeah. What risks are people taking if they're not living with intention and purpose?
Different ages, different stages. So when someone, let's say, starting to work, I think there's very much around climbing the ladder, achieving greater positions, or it might be about the salary or the perks, right? But later on, when we move in life, let's say the next phase, we're in relationships, right? So then things start shifting for us. perhaps priorities start shifting. And in fact, I worked on a beautiful project with women going or coming back from maternity leave, and because that's the time that they're most vulnerable. And the company, it has a great chance of losing the talent, because that's when they question what I'm doing meaningful enough. Is it worth leaving my child and my family behind? You see, so then things start changing for us, and we start questioning the things we're doing, the hours we're putting in. Is it fulfilling? Is it rewarding? Is it worth it?
Yeah, it's about priorities, isn't it?
It is very much about priorities. Then the next stage is really looking at what legacy do I want to leave behind? What makes me proud? What am I going to tell my grandchildren? And also, studies show that if we're living that, right, the life with a purpose and pleasure, it's related to longevity. That's how important it is, right? And I came across a study that showed that a lot of executives, like very successful executives, when they leave work, they tend to die 2 to 3 years later.
Interesting. If they haven't looked after themselves.
Because their priority was work. They sacrificed everything, even the personal relationships and family. So when they reach that retirement age, there's nothing else left for them. They unplug the computer, they leave the files, and they go home with what? Nothing.
Right, because they haven't built up any other interests or relationships or other dreams, all of that sort of thing.
Yes. And in fact, so we have clients working with retirement age executives to exactly tap into that, to help them to look at, okay, so what else can I do besides work before I reach the retirement age and have to leave? Because they know how impactful it can be and how important it is to look at what's next.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I'm glad you said that, because after 3 years of doing so much podcasting and a full-time job, I'm starting to feel a bit worn out, but it's such a good thing for me to do when I retire, which is only in 5 years. So I need to stick with it.
If it gives you pleasure.
Yeah, it does. It does. Look, I'm learning so much. This is why I do it.
And you're smiling. So
yeah. What are some of the wellness workshops that you run for individuals, and do you have any favorite?
I run a number of them based on the therapies that I do, right? So it's based on, for example, Iridology, Bach flower remedies. I do the Kirtan monthly events. And I also partner with other wellness executives or ambassadors, and we co-create workshops. So it can be about energy management. It can be combining, for example, essential oils with Bach flower remedies and educating people. So it's very much related to the wellness work that I do.
Do you have a favorite?
I love them all because this is my passion, right?
Yeah,
Wellness and well-being is my passion.
Yeah, that's amazing. I understand that you do leadership coaching. What does that involve?
First of all, talking to the executive to understand what is it that they want. What would they like to see differently in this engagement? Because usually when the executive reaches out, they want to see something different. So we do a reality check. And we say, okay, so what's going on for you and what do you want to see different? And after that, we start what we call a coaching agreement, where we agree on how many sessions we're going to do. And usually I work with 6 sessions, around 75 minutes each, where we take a look at, okay, so this is the change you created. So let's unpack that. What is it that you're doing? What are your choices? And also, if someone is making certain choices, what's the impact of those choices? Because a lot of the work is around creating awareness. A mentor coach that I worked with, she used to say, awareness creates choice. Because a lot of us are in the autopilot mode. So we're not realizing, okay, so these are the choices I've made and this is the impact. And then after that, what do you want to change? And are you ready to change those things, those choices? And if they feel ready, the coaching will support them to create those changes so they can tap into who they want to be and what they want to see differently. So it is a process. I just say that there are 2 outcomes. There's the transactional, the goals or objectives and things that they practically do. And the other is transformational. Who do they become after the series? Do they realize they are after the series? So there's a transactional component and the transformational component. to leadership coaching.
Sounds awesome. What advice do you have for someone who's burning the candle at both ends?
It would be easy to say, sleep more, do this, do that, but it really depends. It depends on what's going on for the person. Each person goes through a unique experience. Each person may be doing things a certain way because depending on the setup at home, depending on what's going on at work and things like that. So then it's taking a look at what's going on for you. What type of help do you need to become perhaps more resourceful, to perhaps become more resilient, because you might not be able to change. For example, if someone is the main breadwinner of the house, there's a lot of stress at work, but they can't just leave. Okay, so what are the things that you can do to support yourself to do what you need to do, to perform what you need to perform, right? So there's not really one size fits all, but look at those individually and
it's like tailoring an approach for an individual, isn't it, depending on their needs, which I think is amazing and just shows how great you must be at the work that you do, that you gave me that answer. I think that really does underpin so much of what you've been saying, and it's really, really impressive.
Thank you. And what I usually do also, if I feel that something I can't address, I refer also. Yes. Right. So I think what's important also in the area that I work is acknowledging what I can do and what I cannot do. So there are certain emotional and mental states that if there are big red flags, we refer to counselors, to psychologists, psychiatrists, and things like that. So it's really being aware and responsible of how can we support the clients and which tools do I have and which I don't have.
Yeah, that's brilliant as well. Just to finish up, what would be just some general self-care tips that you would suggest for my listeners if they're thinking, yeah, I'm overworked or I'm stressed or I'm not managing at my best? What are some tips that you could give them just to turn things around a little bit?
Well, I would love to list a number of them, but I'll zoom in on 3 that I think can make a big impact, a big difference. First is having a mind practice. Before, we always asked clients, do you have a physical practice? Yeah, I go to the gym, I do this and that. But today it's about a mind practice. Do you have a mind practice? It's as important, if not more, because we're in a different context where our minds are being tested day in and day out. So breathing exercise, mindfulness, meditation, have a mind practice. The second one would be sleep. A lot of us sacrifice sleep. We extend our days. We fill in with a lot of things. And if there's one thing to sacrifice, it's usually sleep. But sleep, what happens is throughout the day, we build what we call the proteins in the brain. And these proteins need to be washed. And if we can only do it during the sleep. So if we're not sleeping, we're not doing the full cycle. I'll give you an example. It's like putting the dishes inside the machine, turning on the washing machine. And then if you don't sleep properly, you open the machine before the washing is done. So that's how you wake up for the next day. So you're not tapping into your best ability. Your brain, your executive center won't be at the best for the next day. Especially if you have to use a lot of mental power during the day, get your sleep. The third one, last one would be move. And now with the pandemic, a lot of people are having to sit longer hours, move as much as you can, stand up as much as you can, do your stretching, do a few walk outside the house or inside the house as much as you can. A few different reasons. One of them is the nutrients. If you're digesting and if you're absorbing, you need to send those nutrients throughout the body to all the cells and to the brain. And you can only do that by movement. And also called the lymphatic system that's related to the immune system. So we're supporting our health. So keep moving as much as you can. It's like stand up. Your stand-up desks is based on that, right? So stand up if you need to. Don't take all the calls or sit on the computer for too long.
Yeah, that's great advice. Cristina, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been absolutely fascinating and I've learned a lot. How can my listeners find you if they'd like to get in touch with you?
First of all, my website, it's www.manipurawellness.com. If you're looking for corporate wellness techniques, I write every other week. LinkedIn, so my LinkedIn page has tips. And for the individual wellness workshops, I have a Facebook account for Manipura Wellness And lastly is my email. So if anyone has any questions or any curiosity about what I do, it's Cristina@manipurawellness.com. And Cristina with no H. It's the Latino version.
Oh, fantastic. I'll put all of those links in the show notes so that people can find you easily. Cristina, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been a real pleasure and lovely to meet you. And I'm sure my listeners are going to get so much out of this conversation. So thanks again.
Thank you, Jules. Huge pleasure to be with you.
For my listeners out there, thank you once again for joining us. And if this is something that you've enjoyed or you felt has been useful, please can you share it with your friends and family? And if you could go to iTunes to rate and review us, that will help me get up the iTunes charts and it will help people find Cristina and Manipura Wellness. So thanks again, Cristina. Thank you to my listeners. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.